The furnace technician called me 4 days after Thanksgiving and whispered, "Mr. Reeves, there's a child behind a locked door in your son's house." My son had told me no child had lived there for almost a year. I had eaten dinner in that same house 4 nights earlier. 30 guests had smiled beneath gold lights, while my daughter-in-law posted photographs of their quiet, child-free holiday. Somewhere above the garage, a little girl had listened to us laugh through the heating vent. When I unlocked the room, she was sitting on a bare mattress with a paper plate in her lap. She looked up at me and asked, "Are you Grandpa Calvin?" I had never heard her voice before. My son was in Palm Springs, posting poolside pictures with the woman who had hidden his daughter. That was the moment I stopped asking what had happened to the boy I raised, and started deciding what kind of man I would be next. My name is Calvin Reeves. I was 65 that winter, retired after 37 years as a maintenance supervisor for the Grand Rapids Public Schools. I repaired boilers, lockers, and cracked windows, and learned that buildings reveal problems long before people admit them. My wife Ellen joked that I could hear a bad bearing across a parking lot, but miss a lie at my kitchen table. She was right. Ellen died 7 years earlier from pancreatic cancer. We had raised one son, Aaron, in a brick tutor on Lowell Avenue in East Grand Rapids. After her death, I moved to a modest apartment and let Aaron live in the house rent-free, although I kept it in my name because it was the last large thing Ellen and I had built together. Aaron was 36, charming, successful in marketing, and once kind enough to drive across town in a snowstorm just to bring me jumper cables. Remembering that boy made the man he became harder to understand. Daisy was his daughter from a relationship in his 20s. Her mother, Megan, lived near Indianapolis, and Aaron always had a reason for seeing the child rarely. Work, distance, conflict, or the claim that Daisy was happier with her mother's family. I met her twice as a toddler. Ellen adored her and kept a wooden rocking horse in our living room, waiting for visits that seldom came. After Ellen died, Aaron said Megan wanted no contact, so I sent birthday cards through him and accepted the explanation that hurt least. 4 years ago, he married Brooke Lane, a home and lifestyle creator who turned our oak-trimmed family home into a white filming set. She called the house beautifully dated, converted my garage workbench into a studio, and slowly edited me out of their lives. 11 months before that Thanksgiving, Megan died in a highway accident. Aaron told me 6-year-old Daisy had remained with her maternal aunt and refused to give me a phone number. "She barely remembers you," he said. Meanwhile, he and Brooke began presenting themselves online as a proudly child-free couple. When I asked how Daisy fit that story, Aaron replied, "This is exactly why we don't include you in things." I should have challenged him harder. Instead, I remained still. Thanksgiving was the first time I had been invited to the house in nearly 8 months. Brooke was filming a holiday series sponsored by a cookware brand and wanted the tables to look full. She asked me to bring Ellen's handwritten stuffing recipe because Heritage performs well this time of year. I almost refused. Then Aaron texted, "Come on, Dad. It would mean a lot to have you there." I arrived at noon carrying 2 casseroles and Ellen's wooden Christmas village, which Aaron had asked to borrow for the mantle. Cars filled the street. Inside, every surface glowed with candles, greenery, and carefully arranged imperfection. Brooke's parents stood near the fireplace greeting guests as though the house belonged to them. Her mother, Valerie, wore an ivory sweater and told me the remodeled rooms finally had a sense of identity. "Brooke rescued this place," she said. I looked at the white-painted staircase where Aaron had once raced toy cars and answered, "It already had one." Valerie smiled without warmth. Homes have to evolve. I was seated at the far end of the table beside Brooke's photographer and a neighbor I had never met. Before dinner, Brooke made everyone stand for photographs. She placed her parents beside her and Aaron, then arranged friends around them. I waited near the edge until she handed me her phone. "Calvin, could you take one of the whole family?" she asked. I looked at Aaron. He studied the floor. I took the picture. 30 people smiled in the house Ellen and I had spent 23 years paying for, and I was once again the person behind the camera. During dinner, Brooke spoke about gratitude, authenticity, and the freedom of designing a life without obligations that did not fit. Valerie squeezed her hand. Someone asked whether she and Aaron ever regretted not having children. Brooke laughed. "Absolutely not. We love being the fun aunt and uncle. Parenting should be a calling, not an accident people spend the rest of their lives resenting." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. Aaron took a long drink of wine. I asked, quietly. And what about Daisy? Conversation vanished. Brooke's photographer lowered her camera. Valerie looked at me as if I had used profanity. Aaron said, Dad, we discussed this. No, I replied. You told me not to discuss it. Brooke gave a patient smile meant for an audience. Daisy is happy with the people who are equipped to care for her. Dragging private pain into a holiday meal helps no one. Then she turned toward her phone and resumed talking about the centerpiece. A few minutes later, music began playing through the ceiling speakers. Beneath it, I thought I heard a thump overhead. I looked up. Aaron noticed. Old pipes, he said quickly. I had maintained old buildings my entire adult life. Pipes did not make that sound. But the dining room was loud, someone asked me a question, and the noise did not come again. I let the moment pass. That failure still visits me. After dinner, I found Ellen's stuffing untouched on a side counter. The catered dishes matched Brooke's color palette better. I packed the casserole and Christmas Village into my truck. Before leaving, I asked Aaron one more time for Rebecca's number. He leaned close enough that no one else could hear. You are not Daisy's hero, Dad. Stop trying to make yourself important. 4 days later, he called asking for a favor. He and Brooke were flying to Palm Springs for a 10-day couples retreat that was partly vacation and partly sponsored content. The furnace had been making a clicking sound, and Aaron wanted me to arrange a service visit while they were gone. You know the system, he said, and honestly, you have more free time than we do. No apology for Thanksgiving, no question about whether I got home safely, just a broken appliance in a house I still owned. I agreed because the temperature was expected to fall below 20 degrees. I called Malik Johnson, a technician who had worked under me for 12 years before opening his own heating company. Malik was competent, careful, and impossible to rattle. That is why his voice frightened me when he called from the house. Calvin, I need you here, he said. The furnace is fine, but there's a locked room over the garage, and someone inside keeps coughing. I thought of the thump above the Thanksgiving table. Are you sure? A child just asked me through the vent if Aaron had come home. I drove across town with my hazard lights blinking through sleet. Malik waited in the driveway, his tool bag open beside him. He told me the thermostat for the room above the garage had been shut off at the valve. The rest of the house was warm, but that section had no heat. A narrow door at the top of the back stairs was secured with a sliding bolt on the hallway side. I stared at it, unable to make my hand move. Ellen had used that room for sewing. Aaron had done homework at the window while she worked. Brooke later called it storage. I lifted the bolt. The room smelled of coal dust, old fabric, and instant noodles. A child sat on a mattress beneath the window wearing 2 sweaters and socks without shoes. Paper plates were stacked in a plastic bin. A small electric kettle stood on the floor beside cups of dried noodles. There were coloring pages but no crayons, only short pencil stubs. The girl's hair hung across her face. When she looked up, I recognized the serious mouth before I recognized anything else. Daisy? I said. Her eyes widened. Are you Grandpa Calvin? I crouched because my knees would no longer hold me. Yes. How do you know me? She reached beneath the mattress and pulled out a faded birthday card. I had mailed it 3 years earlier. On the front was a cartoon bear holding balloons. Inside I had written, Grandpa Calvin loves you, even from far away. Aaron had delivered at least one. Daisy held it with both hands. Daddy said you were too old to visit, she whispered. He said Grandma Ellen died, and you didn't want another kid making you sad. I could not speak for several seconds. Malik turned away and wiped his face. I asked Daisy how long she had lived there. She counted silently on her fingers. Since before summer. Aunt Rebecca got sick, and Daddy brought me here. Brooke said I could stay if nobody knew. She said children would ruin the work she built. I asked whether she went to school. Brooke taught her worksheets sometimes, Daisy said, but mostly she had to stay quiet while videos were being recorded. On days when visitors came, the outside bolt stayed closed. On Thanksgiving, Aaron had brought her a sandwich before sunrise and told her not to make a sound until everyone left. She had heard me downstairs. She had recognized my name when someone called me to take the picture. I tried to knock, she said, tears filling her eyes. Daddy came up and said if I embarrassed Brooke, they would send me somewhere worse. I looked at the mattress, the kettle, the paper plates, and the vent through which this child had listened to 30 adults praise a child-free life. Rage arrived, but it did not feel hot. It felt clean. Daisy, listen to me, I said. You did nothing wrong. You were never supposed to earn a place in this family by disappearing. She studied my face as if deciding whether adults could be trusted one more time. Can I come out? You are already out, I said, and no one is locking that door again. Malik called for help while I wrapped Daisy in my coat and carried her downstairs. She weighed too little, though not as little as the fear in my mind had imagined. In the kitchen, she stared at the refrigerator as if it belonged in a museum. She asked permission before taking an apple. I told her she never needed permission to eat in that house. Then I noticed the refrigerator covered with photographs from Thanksgiving. Brooke had already printed some for a sponsored post. There were smiles, candles, matching plates, Valerie's hand resting proudly on Aaron's shoulder. In one picture, the ceiling vent above the table was visible. Daisy had been on the other side of it. The paramedics arrived first, followed by a deputy and a woman from Child Services. I answered questions, but that afternoon is a blur of blankets, clipboards, and Daisy refusing to release my hand. At the hospital, a doctor said she was underweight, iron deficient, and suffering from prolonged anxiety, but she would recover physically. The emotional part would take longer. When the caseworker asked whether there was a safe family member, Daisy knew. She pointed at me. Grandpa Calvin found me, she said. By evening, I had permission to take her home while the adults decided what happened next. I will not turn this story into a courtroom drama because that is not where the real decisions were made. The important decision had already happened in a cold room when Daisy asked to come out and I said yes. Everything afterward was paperwork catching up to the truth. My apartment had one bedroom. Daisy took it. I slept on the couch. The first night, she stood in the doorway holding the faded birthday card and asked whether she had to close the door. No, I said. You can leave every door open. She asked whether she could keep a lamp on. I turned on 3. At 2 in the morning, I woke to find her sitting on the floor beside the couch. I thought you left, she said. I moved over and let her curl beneath the blanket beside me. She slept with one hand gripping my sleeve. I stayed awake listening to her breathe and thinking about Aaron at 9 years old, sleeping the same way after a thunderstorm. People like simple stories about monsters. They want cruelty to arrive with a face no one loves. The truth is worse. Sometimes the person who frightens a child is the same person whose fever you once checked with your lips, the same person you taught to ride a bike, the same person whose school pictures are still in a box under your bed. Aaron called the next morning from Palm Springs. What did you do? He shouted before I said hello. Brooke was crying in the background, though I could not tell whether she was frightened for Daisy or for herself. I opened a locked door. I said, You had no right to go through our private spaces. It is my house. You said it was ours. I said you could live there. I never said you could imprison a child in it. He began explaining. Daisy had behavior problems. Rebecca could not manage her. Brooke worked from home and needed quiet. The room was temporary. They were planning to enroll her in school after the holidays. They had left food, water, and an emergency phone. Each sentence was shaped to make neglect sound like scheduling. I asked why the bolt was outside the door. Silence. Then Aaron said, Brooke panics around children. You know what she's been through. I did not know, because Brooke had never shared anything that did not come with flattering lighting. Daisy has been through more, I said. His voice turned cold. If you make this ugly, you'll lose me. I looked toward the bedroom where Daisy was sleeping beneath Ellen's quilt. You made it ugly, I said, and you lost yourself long before you threatened me. He told me I was kidnapping his child. I told him the people handling the situation could explain where she would stay. Then Brooke took the phone. Her crying stopped the second she spoke. Calvin, you have always wanted Aaron to choose you over me. This is your chance, right? You found a damaged little girl and turned yourself into a hero. Daisy is not damaged, I said. She was harmed. There is a difference, and you are responsible for knowing it. Brooke said I was destroying their livelihood. Sponsors were already asking questions because Malik's truck had been seen outside and a neighbor had noticed the ambulance. Tell them the truth, I said. You build a child-free brand by locking a child outside the picture. She hung up. The next week was exhausting. Daisy needed clothes, appointments, school records, and food she could choose herself. She hid granola bars beneath her pillow, flinched when the furnace clicked, and apologized whenever she laughed. At a store, she chose purple pajamas only after I assured her Brooke's dislike of bright colors no longer mattered. At home, she drew houses with many windows but no doors because she explained doors could lock. I put every picture on the refrigerator. Aaron and Brooke returned early from Palm Springs, but were told not to contact Daisy while she was being evaluated. They came to my apartment anyway. Aaron pounded on the door. Brooke stood behind him, filming with her phone, until I opened it and stared at the lens. "Turn that off," I said. "We are documenting your hostility," she replied. "Then document this clearly. You are not coming inside." Aaron said he wanted his daughter. Behind me, Daisy dropped a crayon. Aaron called sweetly, "Come here, baby. Daddy's home." Daisy backed into the kitchen. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "Do not use a sweet voice now," I said. "She knows what your real voice sounds like through a locked door." Aaron's face twisted. "You don't know what living with her was like." That sentence ended whatever sympathy I still had. He spoke as if Daisy were something that had happened to him. "She is 6, I said. "You are 36. If one of you had the power to change that house, it was not her." Brooke told me the whole family thought I was unstable. She said Valerie would make sure everyone understood I had always resented their success. I laughed once. "Your success was filmed beneath a vent, where a hungry child was listening." Her phone lowered. For the first time, she had no line prepared. I asked them to leave. Aaron said, "If you do this, I will never forgive you." "I am not asking for forgiveness," I replied. "I am asking you to stay away from Daisy." They left after a neighbor opened her door and watched. The family group chat soon blamed me for humiliating 2 overwhelmed parents. I uploaded one photograph of the outside bolt and wrote, "A child is family even when she is inconvenient." Then I left the group. Online, Brooke described herself as the victim of a private family betrayal and claimed a vulnerable child had been weaponized against her. She never used Daisy's name or wrote, "We are sorry." I drafted a public response, then deleted it. Daisy did not need her trauma turned into content for either side. I sent Brooke one private message. "Stop using this child to protect your image." She replied, "You don't get to police my voice." I answered, "No. But I can remove my house from it." A week later, I notified them they would need to leave the Lowell Avenue house. I gave them reasonable time to collect their things because I wanted no scene, no revenge, no smashed furniture or public spectacle. Aaron called within minutes. "You are taking our home too?" It stopped being your home when you made part of it a place a child feared. He reminded me of every renovation they had paid for. I reminded him that 4 years of free housing had been worth far more. He said Brooke's work required the kitchen and that losing it would destroy their income. "A kitchen is not a career if it requires a locked room above the garage to preserve the illusion," I said. Then he used Ellen. "Mom would be ashamed of you." I had expected many things from him, but not that. For a moment, I saw Ellen at the kitchen sink, humming while snow gathered outside. I saw her kneeling beside toddler Daisy with the wooden rocking horse. "Your mother kept that horse in our living room for 3 years, hoping you would bring Daisy back," I said. "Do not use her name to defend what you did." I ended the call and blocked him for the evening. That night, Daisy had a nightmare. She woke screaming that the Thanksgiving people were downstairs and she had made too much noise. I sat beside her until dawn. Around 5, she asked why Aaron did not want anyone to know she existed. There are questions adults want to answer with soft lies because the truth makes us look helpless. I could not tell her that her father loved her in his own way. Love that requires a child to vanish is not a version of love. I will teach. "Your father wanted other people to believe something about his life that was not true," I said. "He made you carry the cost of that lie. That was wrong." "Was I bad?" "No." "Was I too loud?" "No." "Did I ruin Brooke's work?" "No." Adults are responsible for their own choices. She thought for a while, then asked, "Can I have cereal?" Healing is strange. Sometimes it arrives one ordinary request after a devastating question. We ate cereal at sunrise. In December, Daisy started first grade near my apartment. Her teacher kept the classroom door propped open, and Daisy stored crackers in her backpack even though lunch arrived every day. She loved art and brought home a painting of a red house with a yellow door standing wide open. I framed it. Aaron sent messages through relatives saying he missed her and accusing me of turning her against him. But he never asked what she ate, how she slept, or what frightened her. He was offered counseling, parenting classes, and supervised visits. He attended once, demanded exceptions, then stopped. Brooke refused because participating would look like an admission. Daisy needed consistency when no one watched. They wanted innocence when everyone did. Christmas morning, Daisy found Ellen's old wooden rocking horse beneath our borrowed tree. "Did Grandma know me?" she asked. "She loved you from the first day." Daisy rocked until her hair flew, and I turned away to hide my tears. Aaron emailed a photograph of a dollhouse he would deliver if I stopped making everything difficult. Gifts with conditions are not gifts, so I declined. That afternoon, Daisy and I ate pancakes for dinner. She poured too much syrup and laughed through the most honest holiday meal I had eaten in years. Aaron and Brooke moved out of the Tudor in January. They left empty rooms, abandoned sponsored products, and the sliding bolt above the garage. I removed it alone because Daisy never wanted to return. Walking through the house, I remembered Ellen rocking our feverish son in one room, and that son telling his daughter she could not be hurt in another. A house does not choose what happens inside it. People do. I sold it in early spring. I used part of the sale money to buy a 2-bedroom bungalow near Daisy's school and protected the rest for her future. She chose sunflower yellow walls and left one painted fingerprint on the window trim. I kept it. The Tudor's final purpose was not revenge. It was protecting the child Ellen had once waited to welcome. When Aaron learned it was sold, he appeared at the bungalow. He looked thinner. Brooke had lost sponsors, and their marriage was fraying without its beautiful backdrop. For a moment, he looked like my son again. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stepped outside and closed the door. Daisy was doing homework at the kitchen table. Aaron said he had made mistakes. He said Brooke had controlled the house and threatened to leave if Daisy became part of their public life. He said he had been afraid of losing his marriage. "So you chose to let a 6-year-old lose everything instead," I said. He cried and said he heard Daisy whenever the furnace started. I wanted his grief to be enough. But remorse is measured by what someone does for the person harmed, not by the pain consequences cause. I asked why he stopped attending the parenting program. His eyes shifted toward the yard. "The counselor treated me like an abuser. You locked your daughter in a room. I never hit her. You taught her that her existence was a punishment." He said supervised visits were humiliating. I told him humiliation was sitting above a Thanksgiving dinner, afraid to cough. He wiped his face and asked whether I would tell the caseworker he deserved another chance. "Follow the process," I said. "Show up. Stop blaming Brooke and me. Say what you did without adding but." His anger returned so quickly that I knew the tears had not changed him. "You love this," he said. "You finally get to be the better father. I would give anything not to have learned I was the better father this way." He told me I had replaced him with Daisy. "She is not your replacement." I said, "She is the child you abandoned." He left without asking to see her. 2 weeks later, Aaron moved to Chicago for what he called space to heal. I called it another departure. Brooke moved to Nashville and rebranded around surviving family trauma. I stopped looking. There is no peace in monitoring whether someone who lied about you has learned the truth. Daisy's life grew in small, unmarketable ways. She learned to ride a bicycle, made a friend, left food on her plate because she trusted breakfast would come, and stopped asking permission to open the refrigerator. The first time she slammed her door, she reopened it pale with fear. "Am I in trouble?" she asked. I knelt beside her. "You may not slam doors because it shakes the pictures, but being angry does not make you disposable." She cried against my shoulder. I think that was the day she began believing the house was hers. The official decisions happened quietly in offices. Aaron ignored a clear path toward rebuilding contact and eventually agreed Daisy should remain with me permanently. He signed because leaving was easier than changing. I signed because Daisy needed a home no adult could make conditional again. Outside, after it was done, he said, "I hope you're happy. I hope one day you understand that this was never about my happiness." I said, "That was the last conversation we had." I blocked his number and wrote one final letter. I loved the child he had been and grieved the man he chose to become. But love did not require access and forgiveness did not require reconciliation. If Daisy wanted contact when she was older, that choice would be hers. Until then, he was not to call, send relatives, deliver gifts, or appear at our door. Years of broken doors had taught me that boundaries work best when their frame is solid. The next Thanksgiving, Daisy and I hosted dinner in the bungalow. Malik came with his wife and two teenagers. My neighbor brought macaroni and cheese. A teacher from Daisy's school brought pie. We used folding chairs and plates that did not match. There were no sponsorships, no cameras, and no one asked me to stand behind the phone. Before dinner, Daisy insisted on making place cards. She wrote each name in a different color. At my seat, she wrote, Grand P. Calvin in letters so large they covered the card. Beside it, she placed Ellen's old photograph. Then she made one more card that said Grandma Ellen and set it near the wooden village. So she knows she's invited, Daisy explained. I had to look away. During dinner, someone dropped a spoon. Daisy flinched, then continued eating. Halfway through dessert, she laughed loudly at one of Malik's stories. The sound filled the room. No one told her to be quiet. No one turned up the music. No one climbed a staircase to punish her for being heard. After everyone left, we washed dishes together. Daisy stood on a stool wearing yellow pajamas covered in stars. She asked whether I remembered finding her. Every day, I said. Were you scared? More scared than I had ever been. But you opened the door. Yes. She handed me a wet plate. Why? I thought about all the complicated answers. Because the house was mine. Because Malik called. Because Ellen would have expected it. Because no child should live behind a bolt. The simplest answer was the truest. Because you were on the other side. Daisy nodded as though that settled everything. At bedtime, Daisy put the faded birthday card in a box instead of carrying it and left her door open only because she liked hearing me make coffee. Buildings and children both tell the truth if you pay attention. I missed hers because Erin offered an explanation easier than suspicion. I cannot return the months she lost, but I can give her food she does not hide, mornings without fear, and a room where privacy never becomes imprisonment. I can teach both of us that self-worth does not come from fitting someone else's picture. Cutting Erin off did not feel like revenge. It felt like removing a damaged wire before it burned down another room. I still remember Erin as a boy with a plastic toolbox, and I still love him. Love did not disappear when I learned what he had done. It stopped being a reason to let him continue. You can love someone, refuse their excuses, and close the door without carrying hatred forever. Daisy is 7 now. Her room is still yellow, and she can sleep without every light on. When she asks about Erin, I answer honestly without asking her to hate him. One day, contact will be her decision. Until then, we return to homework, bicycles, burnt pancakes, and the ordinary life she was denied. On the first cold morning of this winter, the furnace clicked on. Daisy paused over her cereal. I watched her shoulders tighten, then slowly relax as warm air came through the vent. It works, she said. It does, and if it breaks, we fix it. She smiled and took another bite. That is what family should mean. Not that nothing breaks. Not that love excuses the breaking. Family should mean someone notices the cold, opens the door, and stays long enough to make the room safe again. So tell me honestly, was I right to cut off my only son after he chose his perfect image over his daughter? Or should a parent always leave the door open for his child, even when closing it is the only way to protect a grandchild? To protect a grandchild? To protect a grandchild? To protect a grandchild?